How's it going, everybody? This is Brian for Pop Culture Crossing, and today we are talking about In Like Flint. This movie is the 1967 sequel to Our Man Flint, and the film was directed by Gordon Douglas and written by Hal Finberg. This sequel is more self-aware than its predecessor, but is sadly plagued by severe pacing issues. As a result, In Like Flint drags itself across the finish line. The film story follows the creative and ostentatious spy, Derek Flint, as he works with the benevolent organization ZOE, or the Zonal Organization for World Intelligence and Espionage. This time around, Flint is tasked with thwarting an all-female cabal that seeks global domination. In Like Flint has elements that will remind you of films such as The Devil Wears Prada, Dr. No, From Russia with Love, and Thunderball. Fans of those films will definitely appreciate the ways in which elements from those films can be seen in Like Flint. James Coburn's Flint is still eccentric, and even more so than in Our Man Flint, but is still charming nevertheless. The movie features the familiar motif of social engineering. Unlike its predecessor, this element is actually used well in Like Flint, and it fits the story's narrative and tone and genre itself. Whereas Our Man Flint featured a more sci-fi third act that introduced this social engineering aspect, and as a result, it really broke the movie's pace, tone, and genre. So in this regard, In Like Flint is a respectable improvement upon its predecessor. Sadly, the movie has glaring problems regarding pacing. These are most evident in the first and third acts, and this should stand out as pretty severe red flags, because the first and third acts are typically the portions in your movie, your writing, your story, your play, whatever that has a 3-act sequence. You don't want to have problems there. It's one thing if it kind of slows down in the second act, but you want to make sure you start on a high note and end on a better one. And sadly, In Like Flint doesn't. The first act feels less like In Like Flint and more like In Like Cramden, with Cramden is Flint's boss and the head of ZOE. And this is because the first act heavily focuses on Cramden's exploits and how enemies are attempting to manipulate him and use him as a pawn for their schemes. This is all well and good, but the first act really kind of is slow to get going until Flint really takes over. The third act, on the other hand, has a decent build to the climax, but it fizzles at the most important part, which is not what you want happening, and it does so on an especially lackluster note. These pacing issues make it especially easy for audiences to lose interest and look at your watch or your phone and wonder, what's going on here? Time is halting. Let's get this movie going. In Like Flint still fits into the retro spy and action adventure genres, and it also has some comedic elements as well. And I would say probably it's more comedic than Our Man Flint. In terms of specific tonal themes, In Like Flint's tone is immersed in a gender war that features both misogynistic and misandristic viewpoints and arguments that fuel both sides of the narrative. This is likely indicative of the film's release window and that it was the late 1960s during the social revolution in the United States, but today it feels pretty tired. The film may have had longer legs in the 60s and 70s, but that doesn't excuse it for having just blatant, almost appalling sexist attitudes reflected by both male and female characters in the film. James Coburn provides a great performance in his reprisal of Derek Flint. As with his acting in Our Man Flint, Coburn really just blends with Flint, and from the viewer's standpoint, you see Flint for Flint, and you don't see Coburn at all. And that, once again, is a sign of Coburn's strong acting ability. He also does a great job projecting Flint's self-awareness. And Flint realizes this time around that the mission and situation are pretty far-fetched, and as a result, he is more self-aware than in the previous movie, and really kind of pokes fun at the movie itself on a meta level. For example, when he learns the name of the operation that has been coined by the evil organization, he flat out says, "Operation what?" Like, that's what you call your operations around here, really, guys? So this also points to a level of cheese in camp in the film. Also, Coburn's dolphin calls are quite entertaining. Lee J. Cobb's Lloyd C. Cramden, the head of Zoe, is well acted. It seems like the film's director, Gordon Douglas, was attempting to approach the story from a different standpoint than in the previous film, and which was directed by Daniel Mann. But I respect this attempt, but it was the way in which it was executed that created some pacing problems and issues. For example, Flint, who's the eponymous character in the movie, really has a little, just scant screen time in the first act. And I think Douglas was trying to focus more on Cramden and have this more nuanced introduction to the story as a whole, but it kind of didn't really work out as well as it would have on paper, for example. Cobb's performance and the trials he endures as a result of that are good, however. Ann Lee's Elizabeth, the leader of the misandrist group, provides a fair performance, but in the end is rather forgettable. And this may be indicative of the writing more so than Lee's acting. The cinematography and production design are decent. In Like Flint boasts pretty good combat sequences, but they are few and far between, and it would have been nice if we had more of those, but you can't always get what you want. It also has noticeable use of various library shots, and I noticed these, but didn't really see any models or dioramas like were featured in Our Man Flint. And in terms of production design regarding the gadgets and tech, this is also well done. Flint really has some fun gadgets to use, and that element of the film is back and provides entertainment from the viewer's perspective. Some of the equipment, however, is a bit overused, and I would have preferred to see a little bit more diversity in the gadgets themselves, but what they had is still great. The headquarters of the secret organization and Flint's penthouse are well constructed, outfitted with great props, and they both accurately reflect the film's overall aesthetic and style. Gordon Douglas's direction of Our Man Flint is fair. I appreciated the social engineering aspect worked better in this film than in its predecessor, but that doesn't excuse In Like Flint from its own problems. And Douglas should have definitely fixed the third act and the climactic sequence. Because of the way this movie ends, you really finish the movie having a pretty sour taste in your mouth, and that's exactly what you don't want in filmmaking. So Douglas really should have ironed out those issues. It also would have been nice if he would have fixed some of the first act problems as well. But thankfully, the first act improved and got better the more we had Flint, but the ending pretty much went up in flames. In the end, I do not recommend seeing In Like Flint unless you really liked Our Man Flint and want to see its sequel. Otherwise, I suggest watching Our Man Flint instead, but just know that going into the film, that movie is not without its own problems and poor conclusion. And you can check our review of that out as well, as it's already posted and available for watching. Generally, the acting in Like Flint is good, and the production design provides entertainment, but the narrative and pacing problems prevent In Like Flint from being a movie that should be watched. So that's my review of In Like Flint. Let me know your thoughts about it in the comments below or on our social channels. As always, our full written review is available at popculturecrossing.com, and I'd appreciate it if you would watch, read, like, subscribe, follow, and most importantly, share this with your friends. I appreciate all your support, and while you're at it, why don't you let me know what your favorite spy movie is that isn't in the Bond or Mission Impossible franchise. I really want to know your picks there, so be sure to let me know, and we'll keep talking about all things spy movies. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.